So what do you have to teach us today?
Yeah, okay, so I'm excited. We're going to be talking about audience building, but specifically when we talk about audience building online, what we're really talking about is building your email list. Like everything else grows in tandem. Of course, there's social media, there's, maybe physical lists of actual addresses. But when we're talking about growing an audience, it all comes back to the email list because that's really who you have direct access to. Where that all begins is, of course, your lead magnet. So a lead magnet, for those of you who guys are not familiar, is also called like a reader magnet or an opt-in incentive, something that you essentially trade in exchange for an email. So anytime it's like, hey, get this freebie, enter your email, that's a lead magnet. But what's always interesting to me, so lead magnets are super powerful for growing your list because, of course, everybody wants a free thing. It's that first step with, developing that relationship with someone. But it can be a little bit tricky to actually nail down like what makes a good lead magnet, because there is such a thing as a bad lead magnet. And problems that I typically see with lead magnets are a couple of things. Number one, ones that are too big. And so I speak from experience here, but there's a tendency when we're thinking, okay, I'm giving away something for free. It's like, what is the most valuable thing I could possibly create that would get people to opt into my email list? And what that ends up in a lot of people's minds is, okay, I need to write a book. And they write an entire book. I'm raising my hand here because I've done that twice. And it took me a while to realize, I'm like, wait a minute, like quantity does not equal value. And even more realistically, it might actually be harmful because if they have to read the entire thing in order to get something helpful from it, well, they're never going to get to the end, right? Yeah. The lead magnet instead should be something really tight. It should be a quick win. Along those same lines are lead magnets that are really vague or general. I see a lot of people, on their websites, they'll be saying something like, get my 7 tips for success. And it's like, okay. Like I could see how that could maybe be valuable, but tell me a little bit more. Like success in what? What kind of tips? What am I downloading here?
Tennis or
right. So that's the second problem that I typically see. And then the third one is lead magnets that aren't actually aligned with the target audience. And this one is a little bit less common. I think that more people are, getting a little bit more strategic with this, but it's still really hard to, if you have a kind of vague niche or a wider group, it's like, how do I even start with this? And they end up with a lead magnet that doesn't quite bring in the right people, or, people who hold on to a lead magnet for years, even though they've pivoted and are now doing, a different audience entirely. And there's just not that alignment anymore.
I'm glad you said that because it is about bringing in the right people. Just because you can give away something free and everybody wants it doesn't mean that email subscriber and that person is going to be right for your client's offer down the road. So you really need to be thinking in terms of how can we find the right person who's going to be ready to buy from my client later. This is key. I see a lot of lead magnets that are also I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I feel like I see a lot that are the same. Do you do that too?
Well, yeah, especially ones that are that vague category tend to kind of morph together a lot. Yeah. But it's interesting that you say that. A lot of us, we think audience building, it's like, oh my gosh, I just need to build the biggest list that I possibly can. Yeah. It's like, no. A list of 100 people who are super tuned in to what you have to say is infinitely more valuable than a list of 10,000 people who are just a bunch of random strangers. Yes. Like that's just, at the end of the day. And plus you don't want to be paying for all of those people. So, so with that, when you're thinking about your lead magnet, the first thing you need to do is start thinking, like what kind of journey am I creating? Because the lead magnet is the first step in a journey. How can you make sure that you're talking to the right people before you begin that big nurturing process of getting them to the purchase?
Yes. And so the reason, everyone, I really brought Jessie in here today, a lot of my students who've just gone through the crash course, your clients are coming to you. They know they need an email freebie. They know, and you need to help them grow their email list. And they're going to come to you with ideas like, how does this sound? How does this sound? And you're going to use these 3 things Jessie taught you to help them find the right answer. Like, what is the right lead magnet? Because your client at this level in the game doesn't have a lot of money to build all these lead magnets that go nowhere. You might end up having to test things, but you want to make sure you follow Jessie with it, not being too overwhelming and too big, not being too vague, making sure it's the right people and just get it right the first time. So your client's going to be looking for you for your advice and for you to be the sidekick, and you're going to have to just resort back to this training.
Yeah, well, and a lot of this too, just so everyone knows, the link I believe you just posted to my website. That's where you can grab. There's the guide on there is all about all of this. It's how to create a good lead magnet. And so, if you're taking notes, you'll definitely want to grab that because it has some additional info as well. But so let's talk about the flip side of it though, because that's kind of like what makes a bad lead magnet. So how do we do one from the ground up that's the good side? And it's pretty much the opposite, right? So the first thing before anything else, we have to think about who is your audience or your client's audience. Who is the person that you want to target with this? And we could get into a whole conversation about niching, but the simple way to think of it is, what do they have in common? What are their common struggles? What are their common desires? And how can you meet them there? Similarly with that, it's time to start thinking about, well, what is one thing that you can teach them? Either one quick takeaway or one quick win. I like to think of this in terms of like, what is one piece of the puzzle that you could give them? Typically like a first step or even a pre-step before they would buy a package from your client, or even something that would help them overcome a limiting belief. Those are like the three categories: a first step, a pre-step, or overcoming a limiting belief, right? Is there something that they don't even believe that this is possible, but you could maybe give them a free challenge through a lead magnet that would help them realize that, oh, I could do this. And then they would be able to work with the client.
That's kind of what my lead magnet does, because it's just 10 things you probably didn't even think about. One of them is watermarking photos and editing and photos and, saving them by that right SEO. And I had built my business starting with like little piddly things like that people needed help doing in their business and were willing to hire out. So I hope that my lead magnet opens people's eyes and helps them get over that belief that there actually is work out there and you don't need to be a programmer or like a coder. So what is your... Okay, so let's go into the next one, and then I want you to tell me how your lead magnet fits into this.
Oh, for sure. No, so I just wanted to give a couple examples too, just to kind of get some brain juices flowing, because I think this is the part where people struggle the most, is what I typically see. Because like finding that first topic is like, oh my gosh, like I could do anything, or maybe there's nothing coming to mind yet. But if you were a regular example I like to use is like if your client is a designer, let's say someone who's a branding designer, and they're asking you for guidance or for ideas. Well, what is that first step of their process? Maybe it's something like choosing brand colors or how to choose your fonts. Those are things that even they may sell as part of the package, but that could easily make a freebie, right? And the whole idea here is that as soon as they got the freebie, they would think, oh, okay, this is helpful. If they gave me that much value in a free thing, how much more value am I going to get from actually working with them?
Yes, they're going to be asking, what's next? How do I work with Jessie? Because her lead magnet was so good and it taught me so much. So what do I need to know next? And they're going to turn to you, or your client.
And so mine is the ultimate guide to high converting lead magnets. It's a lead magnet about lead magnets. But I made it specifically because I realized a lot of people in my audience were struggling with this. So that's really where it started, was my audience. My audience is people typically who are audience builders, who are personal brands, and who are building some sort of email list. So what do they need? They first need to be able to get people on their list. So the lead magnet is that first step. And then the smaller is better. For me, it's if you download it, you'll see it's only a couple pages. It takes you through a couple steps, but at the end you have your quick win. You have everything you need in order to create and launch your first lead magnet. And then the title is specific, perhaps a little bit too specific, but I go for long titles personally. It's really clear what the outcome is. So I
like how you say high converting, because to me as a business owner, that tells me, oh, this is how I can up my game. Like if I already have one and it's not doing great, it's going to tell me like to figure out how to make it better. And it also, you say it in the language that I can relate to, and it will attract the right person. So I think you did a good job.
Oh, well, thank you. So those are the basics for how to create a lead magnet.